countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, it is now time for more of the last comic shop.
That's right. We are opening the shop up to newbies to help them find their way under this giant comic book tent.
And we're keeping the lights on for the oldies, some of which have been around so long that stuff they've loved is now going to be available for everyone.
Wow, that is true. I hope we're available for everybody. And I am the host with the most, Andy Larson, and I'm joined by Chad Smith and Jay Scott as always. And we are never going to go out of style, for sure. I mean,
well, we were never in style.
we are copyrighted and trademarked, so we got that all covered.
Do we? We need to get legal on this. I'm not sure. We filed the paperwork.
Those guys
told me did. Just fire the intern. Fire the intern.
So in any case, if you're wondering why we're talking a little bit about copyright, it's because one of the characters that we're going to be discussing in this week's book, their copyright is actually coming up soon.
Not soon. Blame Rob Liefeld.
Why are you blaming Rob Liefeld?
Because I'm a Rob Liefeld fan, unapologetically. But he, on his podcast a few weeks back, was talking about Superman and how Superman is primed to enter the public domain in 9 years.
Ooh.
Just like Mickey Mouse is primed to enter the public domain next year.
Right. Yeah. And so it started making me think about, like, again, what would that mean to have Superman in the public domain? Because, again, what we're talking about this week is another Superman book. We're going to be covering Mark Russell and Mike Allred's Superman The Space Age, that 3-part miniseries that wrapped up from DC last year. But again, as I mentioned, what would happen if Superman was in the public domain? Because I'll be very honest. I think that you could make a very strong argument that Batman is the iconic DC character, right? It's the first DC character you think of is Batman.
Well, he's the one the company is stupidly named after.
Right, exactly.
Detective Comics comic.
And Spider-Man is the iconic Marvel character. But Superman is the icon of all superheroes. There is no superhero people know more than Superman. And so, like, I think he transcends even, quote unquote, the big two, even though he's a part of the big two. So him going into public domain is huge, kind of like the Mickey Mouse of superheroes. Like, it kind of all starts with Superman.
Yeah, it'll give everybody their own shot at making a Superman comic, whether DC would authorize that or not.
Right. In fact, you could put Superman in Marvel. There you go. Like I've always said, there should be a Superman in Marvel.
No, there shouldn't.
That's the one character that kind of
don't they have Hyperion?
Sam, Sentry.
Look, they should have got Captain Marvel. They should have got Shazam. That's who they should have gotten Marvel. I've said that for years. But in any case, to think about like Superman being in the Marvel universe or over at Dynamite or Image or wherever because he's in the public domain really made me start thinking.
But is he in the public domain? He's not. It's kind of. So this is where things get interesting and legal. And Andrew's going to play some sort of legal eagle backstory. Maybe can do a LA law.
There you go. And we should state before we go too far into this, we are not lawyers. We are not pretending to be lawyers. Please don't confuse us with adequate legal representation.
None of this can be construed as legal advice.
It is true. We failed the bar in like 18 states.
That's not true. We've gone to plenty of bars.
Right. Well, in any case, I'm going to play the country rube who's come into the law offices of Scott and Smith, and they're going to kind of school me a little bit on copyright as well as a trademark. So first and foremost, J.A., how long is actually a copyright on a character in place? And it actually hasn't been that way for forever, right?
No. So currently it is 95 years from the death of the creator in the U.S. In other countries, it's less. In Europe, it's much less. But in the United States, and we're just going to talk U.S. law for this sort of segment, it's 95 years.
Unless the work was published after 1978.
Oh.
In which case?
It is 70 years after the death of the
70
creator.
years, yes.
Right. For older characters like Mickey Mouse, like Superman, it's actually 95 years from first publication.
Okay.
If they were before 1978. So after 1978, the clock starts after the creator's death.
Okay.
So that's a big distinction.
There's a reason for this because of what is aptly named the Mickey Mouse Law, where Disney went to Congress to try to extend the copyright on Mickey Mouse. The one that is now expiring next year was meant to expire, I think, in the 80s. Let us be quite clear. What is expiring is the Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse, and how this relates to Superman. Superman is actually the Action Comics #1, the first appearance of Superman. That is what is entering the public. So, but that again is just the copyright, not the trademark, because trademarks last forever. So if you're looking at, a comic book, Superman, the Man of Steel, the stylized S, the DC logo, here are the things that you would not be able to do in your Superman comic book. You can't call the title of your Superman comic book Superman, because that's trademarked by DC. You can't use the stylized S, also trademarked by DC. You can't call him the Man of Steel on the cover. Inside the book, you can call your character Superman. You can use Clark Kent. You can use Lois Lane. But because this is Action Comics #1, he doesn't come from Krypton yet. I don't know if he flies.
He does not fly. He just leaps tall buildings with
That's right.
rounds.
That did not come into play until the Max Fleischer cartoons many, many years later, when they decided that it was easier to animate somebody flying than just jumping very far.
And even the S is different. It's not your traditional Superman shield that's developed over time.
Yes, and some of that, again, is trademarked. So you can't use it on the cover. So how do you make a Superman comic book, but yet you don't have those elements on the cover, so you can't really show the Superman?
You put him in the Avengers. That's how you do it. You do. No, seriously, why not? If you were Marvel, why wouldn't you call it the Avengers book starring Superman, but you wouldn't put Superman. You just put like him in from the back or whatever, or flying, and just, but yeah, you could do it.
Or you do what Barnes and Noble does and just put a fancy leather-bound collection with a different font.
Oh, see? So it is possible, but that is the reason why there are certain books out there now, like, for example, Dynamite, I think, puts out a book called Lord of the Jungle, which is really about Tarzan, but they can't say Tarzan on the cover because that's trademarked, even though the character of Lord Greystoke, I think that's his name,
Yes.
He is no longer covered by copyright, given that was published eons ago.
And J.A., since you're here to offer an international flavor, there's more to it than just U.S. copyright law as well.
Yes, because European copyright law is much less restrictive than U.S. copyright law. So in Europe, I think it might be less than 50 years. They're like, if you didn't make your money on this, then that's sorry, buddy. You should have bought the wine when you could.
But there you go. But I know you're one of our big Conan fans here on the podcast.
Yes. Oh, Conan gets wet. So Conan is completely in the public domain if you get the original stories. But anything that's been edited, that's not in the public domain. Anything Marvel did, obviously, is not in the public domain. The name Conan is trademarked by the entity that passes the trademark around from Marvel to Dynamite to Dark Horse. If you want to write a Conan book or publish a Conan book, you have to take the original stories as they were originally written. You can transcribe them, but you can't use Conan. So you could call him the Sumerian or but it gets even stronger. There was a guy who was making Conan statues in the likeness of Conan based on the original stories, and he got taken to court and lost because
wow.
What was the justification there?
It was violating the trademark.
Oh, the trademark of Conan's huge muscles.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't know that you could trademark a loincloth. But I guess you can.
Well, in closing, before we get into our comic book review in just a second, I do want to kind of point out that although this law has changed for Mickey Mouse in the past, there's a possibility that it could, I guess, change again technically, because there's a Mickey Mouse law.
A bad law that was put in solely because of the interests of certain congressmen. I mean,
All apologies to our mouse-based overlords that keep those comics that we love coming out all the time. Please don't backball us.
yeah, they own all the IP.
They own the IP, the JP, the KP.
Say what you will about this Mickey Mouse law. I mean, Sonny Bono obviously did it from a place of love because he wasn't doing it so much for him, but for Cher, who's never going to die.
She can turn back time. She can find a way.
All right.
And I'm fine with that because we need to protect Cher.
Okay. We also have to protect our podcast. We're going to have some commercial breaks, and we'll be right back with our review of Superman The Space Age by Mark Russell and Mike Allred right after this.
Hey, it's Mikey Wood, frequent Last Comic Shop guest and collector. And as a collector, I'm always in need of boards, bags, long boxes, and more to house all those comics. That's why I use promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off my orders at bcwsupplies.com. Not only does it get me a discount on BCW's already low prices, but I know using LCSPOD at checkout is another way I can show my support to the Last Comic Shop podcast in their continuing mission to bring fans together under that big comic book tent. So if you're in need of comic book supplies, head out to bcwsupplies.com and use promo code LCSPOD today. That's LCSPOD.
When you're done listening to this podcast, check out mine. My name is Dave, and I'm the host of Beer in Front. My podcast is just enjoying the beer that's in front of you. Sometimes we forget about a classic beer while we focus on the new trendy thing. What I try to do each week is to enjoy an old school classic or have a beer that has potential to be a classic. I'll also talk about events of the day, I'll add my spin to things, and each week there are people that really annoy me, and I'll call them out as the jag-off of the week. That's Beer in Front, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
And we are back with our review of Superman Space Age from DC Comics. Chad, who did this book?
Superman Space Age was a 3-issue prestige miniseries. This came out starting around September of 2022, and then issue 2 came out shortly thereafter, and there was like a 6 or 7 month gap before issue 3 came out to finish things off. But it was written by Mark Russell. It was drawn by Mike Spike Allred. Colors by Laura Allred, and Dave Sharp was the letterer.
Okay, so Andrew, why don't you give us that 10-cent synopsis? What is this about? Why should somebody be interested in yet another prestige Superman comic book? Seems like DC puts out a prestige Superman comic book every year because
every 3 months.
Well, I mean, it's Superman. I mean, so there's an infinite number of Superman stories that you can tell. I really do feel that, honestly.
Really? Because I just think there's one.
Really, because they just retold the same story.
Let me get into the 10-cent synopsis, and we can talk. No, I'm going to
once they get the public domain, they're in trouble. They've only got the one.
Here's the 10-cent synopsis. Okay, so long story short, this is a retelling of like everything you kind of sort of know about Superman. But he crash lands in Kansas. He's raised by the Kents. He wants to do more with his power, but he can't because, you know, the Kents are like, nah, why do you want to do more? Hang out on the farm. And he's like, okay, fine. But this time around, it's in the 60s. And that's the dawn of the space age. And like, so everything's kind of got this like, you know, 60s vibe to it where like Wayne Industries and LexCorp are like competing for like military contracts. I mean, eventually Superman does come to Metropolis, falls in love with Lois, as you might think he does, and then almost starts World War III. Eventually, Lex tries to blow up the country. And you know what? Eventually, what really happens is they retell all of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Right? We did that review like last year. If you want to go back to the Last Comic Shop archives and listen to what happened in Crisis on Infinite Earths, you can, but the 5-cent synopsis of that is like Anti-Monitor just wants to destroy all the universes, which is what happens here. Create a Justice League. There's all the Batmans and Wonder Womans and Flash who just seems to not really care about much. Regardless, it just goes through this timeline leading up to the destruction of Earth. And I guess it comes down to like, what is actually Superman's best choice when it comes to being a hero? They talk about trolleys quite a lot in this series. So that's my 10-cent synopsis. I mean, I butchered it, but like,
Yeah. There's more to unpack here. Yeah.
and there is.
If you're on the switch and the trolley is barreling down the track and switch A sends the trolley with the people towards this comic book, or switch B sends the trolley towards regular Crisis on Infinite Earth, which way do you send them? Which way do you send?
Well, which way do you send them, J.A.?
I definitely send them to Crisis on Infinite Earth, because at least Flash comes out a little bit nice on this one. I don't know what Flash did to piss off Mark Russell, but it must have been something bad, because he's just a dick in this.
Listen, I could totally relate to Flash. I don't know what that says about me, but I spent all my high school years like doodling in class, and like teacher would be like, "Stop doodling! No, this helps me from falling asleep."
Yeah, no, Mark Russell took a page right out of Peter David's playbook when if you had somebody that moves super fast, they would be super bored at all times because nobody would be moving as fast as they could. Basically, it was done in like a great issue of X Factor with Quicksilver already.
The Petro Maximoff syndrome, aka
That's like, what, 87?
Yep, with the Joe Quesada art. That was his first issue.
Well, there you go. You should go read that. That's a
Chef's kiss.
That's a recommendation right from the start. But you're right. Like, he doesn't really care. He likes to build little boats. So maybe that's just, I don't know.
But that was key to the solution at the end of the story, because Superman is all about hope. And how does he find hope? With a ship in a bottle.
I mean, to follow up, like, so what you're saying is you didn't like this book, J.A.?
I thought it was a little pretentious. It was trying to be too cool for school, and, you know, has all these references that I guarantee half the people reading this probably, I mean, I'm sure I missed a lot, and the ones I caught, some of them were funny and some of them I had to roll my eyes with. Like, does he really need to save the Edmund Fitzgerald?
Right? Or the Earth will be overrun with termites or crickets of some kind, or right before the Beatles hit Ed Sullivan.
I thought it was charming. I mean, my initial thought of this was like, I really loved the first two issues. Honestly, I felt like the first two issues were some sort of magical series because I really enjoyed Mark Russell's writing. I thought it was very moving at times. I like philosophy differences between Batman and Superman when it comes to the trolley. If you have a trolley flying through to run over 5 people tied to a railroad track, and then there's like an innocent person just fixing the other track, do you divert the trolley to kill that innocent person so that you can save the 5 people on the track? And Batman's like, hell yes, you do that. Why? Because you don't want to give whoever tied the people to the track the satisfaction of winning. Which is kind of like the same thing that Lex Luthor says eventually. So,
yeah.
But Superman's like, no, you try to save all of them, and if you can't, oh well, at least you tried to save all of them. And so I thought that was all charming. And the Mike Allred art, you know, I'm a fan of Mike Allred. It was one of the major reasons I picked this book, because I've been a fan of Mike Allred since Madman in the 90s. Like that was the book that I came of age of in terms of comic books. But at the same time, you get after issue 2, and then it takes a nosedive like Wile E. Coyote off a cliff.
Trolley runs off the track.
Kills everybody.
There's no rice-a-roni that's saving this trolley. I'll say that much. It is not a San Francisco treat. It is. I don't even know where to start with that third issue, because again, there were certain points that were okay, but like, help me, guys. Like,
okay. So let me just start off with my initial thoughts, because Jay initially said, you know, is this part of the year of Chad? Because he knows I'm a big Mark Russell fan. I love me some Mark Russell books. Because here's the thing. Mark Russell goes back and he starts in the 60s and tells the story as though Superman is living in real time and is affecting things, you know, throughout the 60s. And the first thing I thought of when I read the first issue was, wow, I haven't read something so much like The New Frontier since I actually just read The New Frontier, where you're putting the DC characters in real time, set against the backdrop of, and The New Frontier, it was the space race as well, where you had Hal Jordan being the test pilot and trying to break the speed of sound and all that other stuff. And here it's Superman, learning his powers and learning how to deal with things. And Mark Russell's doing what he can in his own little pocket universe to make those corrections. He takes Lex Luthor and makes him a Bruce Wayne Batman villain, because Lex Luthor businessman is much more simpatico with Bruce Wayne and where he lives. And then he gives you the dichotomy between Superman and Batman, and how Batman, will divert the train and kill the one person to save the five, not only to save the five people, but also to make sure that the villain doesn't get what he wants. Because that's what Batman, he's driven by vengeance. He's driven, by making sure that you deny them whatever it is they're after, which in turn, spoiler alert, ends up killing Batman when he meets this universe's Joker, who was oppressed by Wayne Enterprises. And this is a Mark Russell thing, how Wayne Enterprises was running people out of Gotham into the suburbs and then trying to get rid of all the buildings and get rid of the people that were left in the tenements and, burning buildings down. And they makes Joker, his family, a victim of that. And so Joker is hell-bent for revenge against Bruce Wayne. And then Bruce Wayne doesn't want the Joker to get what he wants. And so ultimately Bruce Wayne ends up dying alongside the Joker. And what happens because of that? Lex Luthor wins. And then you have the Superman story. And Mark Russell wants to make the Superman story all about hope. And about how sometimes hope is, almost even just lying to yourself to have that positive bent, to make sure the positive thing happens. And sure, at the end of the story, and it gets kind of convoluted because you have this other Superman who builds a statue to the first Superman, and people are like, wow, it's kind of egotistical to build a statue to yourself. It's like, no, it's this other guy. But because you had two Supermans in this multiverse, as all these other universes are being destroyed by Brainiac, one Superman's able to clone everyone's DNA and send it through to the universe that's left standing. And the Superman that had held out hope in that universe finds all of the Kryptonian shells. So
whoa. What about Brainiac? Like, Brainiac's in this book, right? He is in this book, but what does he do? Like,
yeah. So Pariah comes and tells Superman, hey, by the way, the world's going to die. And so the Brainiacs are there, and the Brainiacs' job is they are trying to stop the Anti-Monitor by sucking out all the energy for all these worlds the Anti-Monitor is going to destroy and diverting them to like one last shot they might have at another distant world.
Oh, okay.
So even when the Justice League fights the Brainiacs, and the Brainiacs are like, yeah, whatever, we'll let you hang out here for a little bit. Like, it's a stalemate, it's not a victory, it's that kind of stuff. But so eventually Superman, he decides, okay, I'm done being a superhero. I'm instead going to focus on science, and his Kryptonian science is going to clone the DNA of all these people, and he puts them in those crystals. And to get enough RAM on his crystal computer, he has to delete his dad, and his dad goes away. But then he takes that and he sends it into another universe where there's another Superman waiting to take the ball. And then he takes the ball and he recreates all these people. And so he gets to live with them. Whereas the original Superman, he's dead now, I think.
Right. He
but
repopulates
new Superman
in Earth. Is it Earth 2? Is that one of the Earths? I don't know.
Because he repopulates everything.
They're just
anyway,
long numbered things.
Yeah, it's a big long thing about hope and how sometimes it doesn't need to make sense. But the problem is, and this is something that I've noticed for the last couple of years with Mark Russell stories. Mark Russell stories used to be poignant and funny. And whenever he wrote the Flintstones, like, he had all these sociopolitical messages that he would imbue in his work, but he would do it in a way with charm and it was so entertaining to read. And starting with last year, we did the Future State Superman versus Lex Luthor story.
Right.
Remember that? It was a fine story, but what it lacks is the same thing this one lacks. It lacks that charm. It lacks that joy. It might still have the hope, and it still might have the social satirical, like, hey, Bruce Wayne is a bad guy. Lex Luthor's a bad guy. But at the end, as soon as Lex Luthor wins, because he's the baddest bad guy, the universe comes to an end. It doesn't really matter. But there's not a joy there.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask JA that, because again, like, this book is supposed to be all about hope, but like at times, like, I didn't feel it was very hopeful at all.
No, I mean, each issue is like over almost 90 pages. So you spend almost 300 pages getting to know this universe only for it to go away at the end. And you get like one page of this new universe where they all are walking around like it's THX with white jumpsuits.
Yeah, they come back. They're all wearing the Superman movie clothes, right?
I don't know. The writing, I felt it's like those movies that have too much fan service sometimes it can come off as, well placed and funny, and other times it just looks forced, or it's like, oh, that's a fan service gag. Like when Superman's talking to Batman and turns around and Batman's disappeared. He goes, "Where did Batman go?" They're like, oh, that's funny. But then it's like, is it really funny, or is it just like a cheap gag?
No, I felt that. I didn't feel the originality there.
Right. I think, honestly, the only part that I felt original was, honestly, sometimes the way that he handled Lex Luthor. Like, it was refreshing to hear, like, he gets out of prison, notices, like, yeah, we developed kryptonite so that you can kill Superman. And he's just like, why would I want to do that? What, during recess on the playground? Like, how much is this guy's net worth? And he's like, oh, that guy killed himself.
Yeah. But that was nowhere near as good as the Mark Russell that I love, which was the very next panel, where they're like, yeah, and by the way, shampoo sales are down. Everybody has short hair now, so we're not selling enough shampoo. And Lex looks at the bottle. He's like, look at these instructions. Wash, rinse, and repeat. There you go. Problem solved.
Now let's get back to getting me out of jail.
So, yeah, like, I loved his Lex Luthor in this from beginning to end. Like, he did. And you know what? I liked Lex Luthor in the other book that we did, the Superman and Imperious Lex. I thought it was a good... Mark Russell can write son of a bitch of a Lex Luthor. Like, he's good at that. There was some sort of unevenness to this. Although I can't get away from the fact that for the first two issues, I had a hard time putting it down. Like, it was engaging to me. It's just, I just didn't like that third issue, man.
See, I had two big problems with this. And one is people would always tell me that Mark Russell books are heavy-handed. And I was like, yeah, they are, but they're also, I enjoyed the humor. I enjoyed the way he would say things, like his Lone Ranger stuff was great. I love the Wonder Twins. I would recommend any teenager out there, go get yourself a copy of the Wonder Twins. It's great. I loved Second Coming through Ahoy Comics, where it talks about Jesus coming back, and Jesus is a little bit of a rube, and people are like, oh, it's sacrilegious. No, it isn't. It was a thoughtful exploration of religion and how it would work today, and there are all these things that I think Mark Russell is a very thoughtful writer. But in this series, I could feel the heavy-handedness because, one, it starts off on the opening page where Superman's talking about something Jor-El told him, where it's better to live with purpose and die by accident than to live by accident and die without purpose. And like, he spends the entire book trying to hammer that home. It was heavy-handed. And then the other big problem I had, and this breaks my heart a little to say, you have this story where one of the main hooks is it's progressing throughout time naturally. So it's starting in the 60s. You see the Kennedy assassination. You see all this other stuff happening in the background. Meanwhile, Superman's meeting up in the bar with Pariah every few years to see what's going on. And it ends in 1985 with the Crisis of Infinite Earths. But the problem is Mike Allred cannot show people aging. Like, his art style it's great for other things. This was not in his wheelhouse. People either just look like raisins or they just look the same. Like, Batman doesn't age a day. David
struggles
Bowie.
with women, I find. Lois Lane looks like Wonder Woman.
And Mrs. Schumacher, Tess Schumacher, whatever her name is, he just makes her fatter. But, like, he doesn't even do the things they would do in superhero comics. We're like, oh, this superhero is older now? Because, listen, I understand in superhero comics, all superheroes are either like 20s or 30s, or they're in their 50s. But when they're in their 50s, you give them that streak of gray in their hair.
Yes, that is true. That is.
He didn't do that thing. We couldn't tell these people were older because they didn't have those gray streaks. So I don't know if it's the tone and temper of the DC universe being what it is or not having enough room. But honestly, I think Mark Russell and a lot of his work recently, I just feel like he's saving his best stuff for his independent work. And as much as I love Mike Allred, because I do, his art is fun. He was not the right fit on this book.
Oh, I'll tell you what the best part of this whole thing was, and it probably ran in every issue they put out that month. It's at the end of issue 1, that tribute to Neil Adams. That was by far the best part of this entire book. And I just had to look, maybe it's because it was written by Tom King. I don't know, drawn by Josh Adams. I got a lump in my throat.
Oh, well, we'll be right back after these commercial breaks with more Last Comic Shop and our ratings of Superman Space Age. So stay tuned for that.
Welcome to Victims and Villains. This is the channel where we talk nerd, we talk hope, and we speak nothing else. I'm your host, Captain Nostalgia, and I'm so glad that you are here to join us.
Victims and Villains is a podcast and YouTube channel that marries pop culture and suicide prevention, producing content with the intent to let people know that there is hope and that there is a better way, and that each and every listener has value and worth.
Listen to Victims and Villains on your favorite podcast catcher or on YouTube by searching for Victims and Villains. Also, check out their website, victimsandvillains.net.
It was supposed to be a day at the beach. But for four friends, one wrong road will put them on a direct course to being the main course. Her name is Grandma Hazel, a chainsaw-wielding psychopathic cannibal, a beast of the backwoods with a body count higher than a bowl of blood-spattered Scotch mints. From the creators of Hocus Pocus, Grandma Chainsaw. Evil has a perm.
Hey, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our ratings, where if you were wondering whether this segment's going to be faster than a speeding bullet, I think we've done that rating scale before. In fact, I think JA is going to have trouble finding something Superman related, because we've done so many Superman books on this show, right? Like, I mean, tons of them. I mean, but what do you got for us this week in terms of our rating scale?
Well, if we did faster than a speeding bullet, that's something that we could get away with, because that copyright is going to lapse.
Faster than a speeding bullet on Earth 8645 PX972-B.
He did have the costume, that Superman of that universe. I think it was like a Kingdom Come costume, but you're right. Like, if it was supposed to be Kingdom Come Superman, didn't look anything like him at all.
I thought it was Max Fleischer Superman.
Oh, whatever.
I thought it was Earth 2 Superman.
That's what I'm saying. Call with capital L.
At the end of the day, the whole public domain thing doesn't really matter, because there's so many different Supermans out there, and every company has their own Superman dollar store knockoff that, you know, what's one more that just happened to be the original from 1938?
You know what? I want to write some fan fiction about the electric Superman. Remember him, the blue and the red Supermans from the 90s?
So you're going to have to wait. Who wrote that? I feel like Stuart Immonen was drawing that. And so wait till his death in like 70 years, and then you're going to be dead by then. So sorry, dude.
All right. Is it speeding bullets? Is officially speeding bullets again on this show?
No. This so it's more related to the book itself. It's 1 out of 4 trolley cars.
Oh, there you go. The San Francisco treat. All right. Well, I'm going to go first with my rating, and I seriously did really enjoy issues 1 and 2. I think based on issues 1 and 2, I would have given this a solid 4, because I don't care if it was cliche. I don't care if it was heavy-handed. I really loved some of the parts of that. I loved the stories about, you know, Jonathan Kent in World War II. I loved all the little meet-cute moments that Lois and Clark had. I love the fact that, like, Lois Lane knew Clark Kent was Superman the entire time, because, again, she broke the Watergate scandal. So he puts on a pair of glasses, for God's sakes. I mean, you're not going to get one over on Lois. And, like, it made that relationship really matter, because, again, she was testing Superman. She was like, this guy's got a lot of power, and, like, it wasn't until Superman opened up and started talking about his father that she fell in love with him. And it was like, you know, and for me, that was a really great relationship. Now, again, by issue 3, she's stopped being a reporter. Maybe she's a reporter. I don't know. She spends most of her time at the Fortress of Solitude, which is issue 3 I had major problems with. So that's why it's going to come down from a 4. Does it come down a lot from a 4? I don't know. How about 2.95? It's not exactly a 3. Because for a book that's all about hope, it increasingly gets more bleak as the issues go on. I mean, I'm going to say it bluntly. I think issue 3 almost borders on an exercise in nihilism at points. I mean, there's nothing in that issue but death and destruction and the ending of things. And I know that Mark Russell even makes a comment, in a conversation between Clark and his son Jonathan, that, everything has to come to an end. But boy, it doesn't have to come to an end like that. And even with sending the crystal to a different universe, you get all these scenes with the Justice League just like dying in pools of fire and trying to save individuals, but like failing miserably. It kind of felt like Passion of the Christ or something like that, where it's just like, how much like abuse do I need to see the DC characters go through? I think you've made your point, Mark Russell. Go outside and, I don't know, spend some time in the fresh air and the sunshine or something. This is hard to stomach. And plus, although I really love Mike Allred's art, I do agree with Chad that sometimes he has difficulties making people sometimes look different. They kind of all look like folks from the Madman series. But then again, I really loved Madman, Superman, Hullabaloo. And so I really do like the way that he draws Superman. So I didn't have a problem with it for the most part, other than the fact that everybody just looked the same, even though 20 years had lapsed from the beginning to the end. I will say this, though. I think this is much better than the last time Mark Russell did one of those decades kind of books with Fantastic Four Life Story, which we also covered on this show. I think at least this, I cared about Superman much more than I cared about Reed Richards in that last book. J.A.?
Yeah, I went back and forth on this book, whether it was good or just trying to be good, and the writer sort of using all of his different tools, but yet ultimately I think it just comes together as a bunch of elements with that don't quite work. It's a 2 trolley cars for me. It's a retelling of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Why don't we just get an original story? That is what I was missing. I was like, okay, I like what he's trying to do, but why don't you try to do it with an entirely new original story? Why do you have to just retell Crisis? There's so many Superman stories that you can tell. Why retell Crisis? And the interesting bits, Lex Luthor, Bruce Wayne, kind of got lost. And I thought, at points I was like, well, why can't we just get that Batman story? That's much more interesting.
Yeah, Batman v Lex.
And Batman sort of, having to retake Wayne Enterprises back because he let it lapse and it destroyed Gotham. I was like, can't we go back to that? That's a much more interesting story than Clark Kent learning how to shuck corn slowly because there's one way to do it and then there's another way to do it and hear corny tales while you're doing it.
All right, Chad, you're the huge Mark Russell fan. And I will say, for the record, we've done now 3 Mark Russell books on this show. What do you think of this one?
So I want to start by saying what I'm going to say comes out of a place of love. Because I genuinely did love a lot of the earlier Mark Russell works. And I remember, you have those rankings in your head of writers and, comic creators. And Mark Russell was darn near the top for me. Like when he was doing his Lone Ranger with Bob Q, that was great. Any book he touched, I would recommend. I'm like, oh, you got to read this. You got to read this. The last 2 years, I think, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if he needs to go on vacation or what, but he needs to do something to find the joy again. And it's reflected in these stories. And I don't mind heavy-handed. I don't mind preachy. I don't mind his social satire. I, agree with so much of what he writes. All of that stuff is there. Honestly, I think the problem with this series was twofold. One, as much as I love Mike Allred art, and Mike Allred has that style where it's jazzy, it's poppy, it's exciting. I don't think he was the right artist for this book. And I also think that one of the writers that has eclipsed Mark Russell, in my, if I see his name on a book, I'll buy that one for sure, is Tom Taylor. And what Mark Russell needed was not a 3-issue prestige series. What Mark Russell needs is a universe, or he needs a book similar to Tom Taylor's Injustice, where he could explore the Justice League and what makes each of the Justice League members tick. Because I thought his Batman stuff was cool. His Superman and Pa Kent, those conversations, like, those were thoughtful. Those were nuanced. I think the ingredients are there, but it's almost like they try to cram this stuff in. You need in Second Coming, where they go to heaven and, God is having lunch, and you see all the fast food restaurants that have gone away in the background. Like, oh, look, there's a Rex, there's a Kenny Rogers Roasters, there's this, there's that. There are all these little clever notes in some of these other Mark Russell books. Go and read the Flintstones. There's so many great little things in there that you pick up on the side. And I think he would be better suited, instead of a 3-issue prestige series, put him on a book for a year or 2 years. Let him explore his thoughts, because he has great ideas, but he needs to find a new way to make that exciting. Give it some zhuzh, some je ne sais quoi, to get him back over the hump again. Because Superman versus Imperious Lex, it was okay. It wasn't great. Fantastic Four life story, it was okay. This book, it's okay. It's not fully embracing his strengths.
He needs to write a Lex Luthor book.
Yeah, that would be great. Lex Luthor versus the DC universe. And how cool would that be?
Yeah.
Or Lex Luthor running the Legion of Doom.
But maybe not drawn by Mike Allred, because I do agree his style is very whimsical.
Right.
And it doesn't translate well sometimes to, especially Superman, because Superman is meant to, I don't know. He's the alpha superhero of all superheroes.
I mean, I could see in terms of the big theme, like Mike Allred is a very hopeful artist, and he's good with some of those emotional moments, but he's not good with the passage of time. He's not good with showing like deteriorated cities and things of that nature. He's not good at the dirt and grime of the universe. He's too stylized. He's too poppy. He's too fun. But I just think it was a bad fit. So would I've loved this more if it was a 12-issue series and Mark Russell had time for his ideas to breathe? I think I would. As a result, I'm giving the series 2.5. 2.5 out of 4 trolley cars. I think it was a good swing, but I don't think it connected.
Right. Well, I kind of disagree a little bit with your whole 12 issues. I think he needs more than that, because honestly, if you think about this particular book, each issue was 90 pages. That is technically like 3 issues of a standard comic book. So at least this was a 9-issue run. Maybe we are missing like another 3 issues that maybe could have put it over the top. I don't know. Gosh, that 3rd issue. Why that 3rd issue?
And that's a third of the book, right? That's not just you can't just ignore it. It's like Chad choosing to ignore half of Frankencastle because he didn't want to.
Right. Well, that wasn't good, but the rest of it was great.
All right. Well, some other great books that we hope you don't ignore are our recommendations. Yes, part of our show where we like to give you other comic books in addition to Superman, the Space Age, which you can pick up at your local comic book shop if you are so inclined. And we're going to go ahead and start off this week with J.A. Scott, who has, I think it's another chapter in his continuing saga.
That's right.
Of a particular book.
Yes, it's more of a reevaluation than a recommendation. And last year, I recommended that people not read the Dan Slott, Mike Allred Silver Surfer because it wasn't Silver Surfer. And I was just... That being said, it has recently been republished in omnibus form. It had been out of print for a while, but it's back. You can get the newly published omnibus. And I bought it because there's just not a lot of Silver Surfer out there. So I want to support the character because I love him so much. So I bought it and I've been reading it. And if you read it as an Elseworld story and you don't read it as something that is sort of the Silver Surfer that many probably came up with, either the Stan Lee Silver Surfer from the 60s and the early 70s, or the Silver Surfer from the 80s and the early 90s that features in Infinity Gauntlet and the Ron Mars Silver Surfer, then it's fine. If you read it as that, if you kind of say, oh, it's kind of a Silver Surfer meets Doctor Who whimsical story, it's great. I was also reevaluating my stance on the book because I read on Twitter that this is the book that sort of got comic book couples counseling together, or they either bonded over this book, or they became a couple reading this book together, or they were a couple and this is the book that it's the story of their lives. I don't know. They were shouting its praises. And so it forced me to reevaluate my rather harsh initial take on it, because it is ultimately this entire thing is a big story of love.
Oh, true love.
We shall see.
True love. Oh,
so that
look
is my
at you.
recommendation. The newly republished Dan Slott, Mike Allred Silver Surfer Omnibus. It looked beautiful on the shelf.
Oh, yes. And are you finally a fan of Chad and my favorite issue from that run, the Mobius strip issue where it runs backwards and forwards? Mike Allred. I mean, I hope he doesn't come away from this week's show thinking like we're not fans of his work. Like, I've been a fan of Madman for years, and like that issue was tremendously creative.
Oh yeah, even recent Silver Surfer, FF, Mike Allred, those are all the bee's knees.
Yeah. Well, speaking of kind of revisiting franchise, character, whatever, my recommendation is also a revisiting of sorts. As you may or may not know, we've covered a lot of books by the team of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Like, they've got so many crime comic books out there. So you go back, you listen to our Reckless review, you listen to the recent Pulp review that we just did this year, and it has spawned so many imitators out there that sometimes it's hard, say, oh, well, I'm not going to read that, I'm going to read that. But I did pick up a book that a lot of folks have been reading just simply because Jacob Phillips, who is the son of Sean Phillips, who does all of those wonderful colors and all of those Brubaker Phillips joints, he did all the art for this particular series. And that series is That Texas Blood. It's written by Chris Condon, and it really is, again, in that similar vein of all those crime comic books that Ed Brubaker comes out with, where you get this small town in Texas, and there's a small town sheriff named Joe Bob Coates, and he's been around the block and back, and it starts off with an issue all about a casserole dish that ends in tragedy, and the rest of the first volume, which is the one that I'm recommending, deals with the mysterious death of Travis Terrell, who's kind of a unsavory character in that small town, but he had a brother named Randy who was also kind of unsavory, but Randy moved away, tried to escape from that small town, his shadowy past or whatever, but the death of his brother brings him back to that hot, sweaty Texas and stirs up his blood. And from there, it's a tale of crime and woe and old passions and old hatreds. I will say this, although it could have been very easily an Ed Brubaker book at times, because again, even with all like the little caption boxes and the way that like Ed Brubaker likes to write things, Chris Condon does write really good characterization like you would get in any of those Ed Brubaker joints. And so it's kind of like going and wanting to see like a Martin Scorsese film, but then eventually just seeing like a Guy Ritchie film instead. And you're like, yeah, this was pretty good still. I enjoyed it. Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips, I like where they're going. It's a continuing series. Go pick it up. That Texas Blood, it's pretty good. Chad?
For my recommendation, I'm going to go to the one spot where I still see Mark Russell having fun, and that is through Ahoy Comics. He's currently wrapping up his second miniseries in his Billionaire Island story. And basically, if you want Lex Luthor, you're not going to get Lex Luthor, but you can get Billionaire Island, where the ultra rich go to escape.
The plane.
And that's Tattoo from Fantasy Island. There you go. But no, in this one, the billionaires have set themselves, apart from society. The problem is there's a Punisher-esque character that comes through in the first miniseries, and it's all the fun of the Mark Russell satire combined with Stephen Pugh, who was the guy who worked on the Flintstones, which I think I've already recommended a number of times, but that's also in there as well as a recommendation. But it's the one spot where I still see Mark Russell having fun and using his satire in a clever way. And so as much as the Superman stuff has left sort of a sour taste, I recommend you go and track down Billionaire Island or its sequel series, Billionaire Island: The Cult of Dogs. Both will give you that fun Mark Russell that we've been lacking out of his DC work.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Russell's got some great books out there.
Yeah,
so
Not All Robots.
Not All Robots. I love that one. That won a bunch of stuff, Eisner's and all kinds of great stuff. So, any case, we're hoping that you not only check out this week's show, but also go back to our archives and check out some past reviews we did of Mark Russell stuff, such as Superman and Imperious Lex or Fantastic Four Life Story. And you can find all of those episodes available over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. It's a terrific place where you can find episodes, because that's what a podcast is. It's just more evergreen episodes, and we hope that ours is different in that way, that you can listen to them out of order. You can listen to them as you're reading certain books. You can be like, wow, I just picked that up at the comic book store or the library or whatever, and I've read it, and now I want to listen to what the Last Comic Shop thought of that. So make sure that you're getting all of those episodes, as well as making sure that you're protecting your comic books. It's important to protect them, because you never know when the anti-monitor might come and try to destroy your universe. And so you might have to shuffle them off somewhere else. Well, the best place to put them is not in crystals, but in stuff you get from bcwsupplies.com. That wonderful place where you can get bags and boards and boxes and clamshells. And even if you're into baseball cards, it's baseball season, you can get stuff for that too. Use promo code LCSPOD and you get 10% off your order, which will help you save money to build some sort of interdimensional lifeboat so that you can eventually leave and make a statue of yourself somewhere else.
You give your collection to Multiverse You, who can then repopulate it with water, like one of those little pill things that turns into a dinosaur.
Can I leave this forced sponsorship transition? That was painful.
Well, you can, and you can head out to our social media accounts at Last Comic Shop, whether it's on Twitter or YouTube or Hive or wherever we are out there, where you can find things like weekly polls that Jay puts up. You could find Golden Age covers to help tuck you in at night. You could find general conversation about what's going on in the comic book world, random memes that Andy's found. All that's out there on our socials. And if you don't know where to go, you can always go back to home base at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, where you can find what else, J.A.?
We have a link to our merch store where you can get shirts, mugs, t-shirts with our to-be-confirmed copyright or trademarked logo. Don't know that yet. Gotta get the lawyers on that. Intern!
Legal!
Also, beautiful art prints by our wonderful special guest on the show from time to time, Mikey Wood. And also, just basically anything you need. Tote bags.
I need more than tote bags. Like, I mean, we don't have groceries out there.
No, it's not the Amazon yet, but
exactly.
We're getting there.
Can't buy toilet paper and water yet. So, like, I think for tote bags, mugs, yeah, we got that covered. But your local comic book shop's got what covered, Chad?
Well, they've got the books we've talked about today, whether it was Superman: The Space Age by Mark Russell Mike the Spike Allred, or you could go and find The Silver Surfer by Dan Slott and Mike Allred. Or maybe you want to find Billionaire Island by Mark Russell or Stephen Pugh. Or you're going to go with That Texas Blood by Chris Condon and Sean Phillips' kid. No.
Jacob Phillips. He's got the same name as my son.
He's the Jacob Dylan.
He's awesome. And we do have some wonderful news for everybody. On May 20th of this year, we're going to be again doing the live stream for The Cure. Yes, it's the Last Comic Shop's opportunity to give back by supporting cancer research. So make sure that if you're around a computer on May 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, you're going to get a bonus episode of The Last Comic Shop to support live stream for The Cure. Details will be on our social media all throughout April as well as May leading up to the event. So we hope to see you there. Bring your checkbooks. Make sure that you support our continuing efforts to end cancer in our lifetime, I guess.
Yeah, to do good stuff.
I don't think you need to be on a computer. You can probably get it on your smartphone.
Oh,
There
yes.
you go. All sorts of technological ways. But seriously, this is one of the things that's one of my proudest achievements here with the podcast is with your help, we can actually do some good and contribute to a great cause. So please, if you can, tune in. Even better if you can donate and help support us and supporting a positive thing out there in the universe. And just like Superman, keeping hope alive.
Yes. And until next week, when we hope that you come back to our shop and you don't unsubscribe before then. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith and Jay Scott. And remember to stay safe, stay speedy like a speeding bullet. And remember, he may be the Man of Steel, but you're not going to be able to use that in a comic book of your own because that's trademarked. Yeah, that's off the table.
Even once he hits public domain, you can't use Man of Steel.
You could put a guy in blue and red underpants,
but not on the cover.
Did that,
but
right?
not on the cover. Not on the cover.
Not the name. I thought you could do the character. You could make references to the character, just not.
I don't know. DC probably going to come after you if you put a Superman-looking character on the cover. You wouldn't be able to have the S. You'd have to have like a different S.
Well, the original S.
I would do the S means hope
Oh.
in like Helvetica font.
No.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2023 Black Angus production.